Just checking your tech. meeting is now live.
Thank you. Welcome and good afternoon to everybody to this scheduled Planning Committee meeting. Before I start, I would like to confirm which committee members are here.
Thank you, Chair. Sitting for this afternoon session of the Planning Committee, you have Councillors William Armitage, Andrew Cooper, Mark Foster, Roger Hall, Lee Hartshorn, Carol Huckabee, Maggie Jones, Heather Liggett, Alan Powell, Tracy Reeder, Kathy Rouse, Diana Ruff, and Pam Windley. Also in attendance, you have Richard Purcell, who is the Assistant Director of Planning, who will be taking the role that would normally be undertaken by Adrian Kirk, the Planning Manager, during this meeting. You have members of the governance team who will be supporting. You have Alice Lockett and Emily Cartwright from the Planning Service, and Jim Fieldsend offering legal advice today.
Thank you. As you know, we have a protocol in place for this meeting, which I would now ask the facilitator to read out.
Thank you, Chair. This is just to remind members to act as if you would do if you were in the council chamber at Mill Lane, and just be aware that the meeting is being live streamed and recorded. I will start the recording for this session now. You'll hear an announcement.
This meeting is being recorded.
If all members please could speak through the chair and remain muted when not invited to speak. You can indicate you wish to speak by raising your hand clearly. I'll pick that up and I'll pop it across the captions at the bottom of the screen. You can also indicate you wish to speak by messaging through the chat bar. If I can remind you to follow the council procedure rules, introducing yourself as Councillor X representing Councillor Y Ward. We will be doing one poll during this meeting of the Planning Committee. I will issue a poll to you for the minutes, if the chair is in agreement for that. The applications that we'll consider, the voting will be conducted by roll call. Please be mindful of your home surroundings and please keep your cameras on for the duration of the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move to the first item of business. Apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, we have received apologies from the following members. Councillor Ross Shipman will be substituted by Councillor Pam Windley. Councillor Peter Elliott, who will be substituted by Councillor Heather Liggett. Councillor Jane Barry, who will be substituted by Councillor Lee Hartshorn. Councillor Jacqueline Ridgway, who will be substituted by Councillor Margaret Jones, and Councillor Mo Potts, who will be substituted by Councillor Roger Hall.
Have we received any other apologies?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. The second item is for declaration of interest. Members are requested to declare the existence and nature of any disposable pecuniary interest and or other interests not ready on their register of interest in any item on the agenda and withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. Have we received any declarations of interest?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Do members have anything to declare?
No indications, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to item 3, minutes of the last meeting. We now have the minutes of our meeting held on the 25th of August 2020. Are we happy that they are a correct record?
Move those, Chair.
Move it. Second.
Oh, all those in favour? Thank you very much.
Chair.
Did you manage to get all of that, Nikki?
I did. That was carried, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. That moves us on to the main business today. As you can see, we have 3 applications for this afternoon, each of which has its own report, marked items as 4A, 4B and 4C. I'm happy that this is intended to consider them in as that order. However, before we do so, I would like the clerk to explain for the benefit of members, speakers and the public who are watching you on YouTube how they will be dealt with.
Right, thank you, Chair.
This is the procedure for considering applications at the meeting. We will consider the 3 applications in the order that they are set out on the agenda. The Chair will introduce the application, then ask the planning officers to refer members to any late comments or updates received since the agenda was issued. The late items agenda supplement has been published and is now on the Council's website, and the link has been sent to members. The planning officers will then give a brief presentation, setting out the application plans and photographs from the site. The screen showing this presentation will be shared with those attending the meeting. They can also be seen on the Council's website through its YouTube channel. Following on from this, the Chair will ask each of the speakers, any ward members first, followed by objectors, then the applicant or their agent, to speak to the committee. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to put forward their views using the conferencing facility. There will be a reminder given by the clerk when 30 seconds remain. At the end of a speaker's 3 minutes, members of the committee will have an opportunity to ask the speaker questions, if necessary, to clarify any points they have made. When we have heard from all the speakers on an application, the Chair will open up the meeting for debate by the committee and determination by a vote. A note for the speakers. Once the application you have come to speak on has been dealt with, you may leave the virtual meeting room. However, if you choose to remain, then please mute your microphone and turn off your camera. You will not be allowed to participate further in the meeting from that point. Now, as you are aware, this meeting is being live streamed. The Council will make a recording for the purpose of preparing the minutes. Once the minutes have been approved by the committee, then this recording will be deleted. Please note, however, that others may also record the live stream from the internet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We can move on to the first application of this afternoon, which is 20/00349/FL. This is an outline application with all matters reserved except for access, layout and scale for single-storey sectional detached log cabin within existing equestrian facility for holiday let accommodation. Land at the northern junction of Hill Houses Lane and New Road, Wingerworth. In line with our normal practice, I'm going to ask the planning officers to tell us about any late comments, reports that have been produced, and for the planning manager to give a brief presentation showing any photos and plans of the site. The meeting facilitator will share the presentation on screen. This means that I might find it difficult to see everyone. Therefore, I will allow the officers to complete their presentation and ask members to reserve any points of order or questions about the process until the end. There will be plenty of time for you to ask any questions later. Thank you. Planning officer, are we ready to go?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Could we have the next slide, please, Nicola? Thank you. This is an outline application with all matters reserved except for access, layout and scale for a single-storey sectional detached log cabin within an existing equestrian facility for holiday let accommodation. The site is located to the north of the junction of Hill Houses Lane and New Road and is highlighted in orange here. The site is located outside of the settlement development limit for Wingerworth. Next slide, please. This slide shows the location plan which identifies an existing equestrian facility access to the west of New Road, featuring a timber U-shaped stable block to the centre, a menage to the west site and associated grazing land. The proposed log cabin would be positioned to the northwest of the existing access and would feature 2 parking spaces. Could we have the next one, please? Thank you. Here the slide shows the proposed floor and elevation plan for the 2-bedroom log cabin. Moving on to the photos. Thank you. This photo is taken from New Road and shows the junction where Hill Houses Lane to the left, New Road to the centre and Long Edge Lane to the right meet. We have the next one, please. This photo is taken from Long Edge Lane. The site is located behind a mature hedgerow. To the right of the photo is the existing access to the equestrian facility. This is located approximately 24 metres from the junction and 6 metres from the bus stop. Could I have the next one, please? Here we have the existing access point, which is taken from the west of New Road. Next one, please. This slide shows the existing equestrian facility. As you can see, this comprises of a U-shaped timber stable block. Next one, please. This is a further photo of the stable block with the menage scene in the background. Next one, please. This photo shows the proposed siting of the log cabin. This would be set back approximately 12 metres from the highway behind the mature hedgerow. As you can see, the land slopes in a southwesterly direction, away from New Road and down Hillhouses Lane. The difference in levels from New Road to the bottom of the field is approximately 10 metres. The contours of the land have been utilised to allow for the log cabin to be set down approximately 3 to 4 metres below street level. We have the next one, please. This slide shows existing access and screening which blocks any views into the site from along New Road. The log cabin would be sited to the left of this screening. Thank you. This photo is taken from along Hillhouses Lane, looking up to the junction with New Road. The proposed log cabin would be sited to the left of the hedgerow, and as you can see from the photo, views into the site are not possible. We have the next one, please. Thank you. Finally, this photo is taken from the public footpath number 22, which runs to the west of the site. Far-reaching views of the top part of the site are possible from here. Thank you, Nicola. Outline permission with matters relating to access, layout and scale is sought for the single-storey detached log cabin, with appearance and landscaping details submitted at reserved matter stage. The layout shows one detached bedroom log cabin with access being utilised and taken from the existing access point. The log cabin would be positioned to the west of the access with 2 parking spaces. Due to the changes in levels throughout the site, we would expect that levelling works would be undertaken. We received consultee comments from Highways and Environmental Health, both of whom raised no objections subject to the inclusion of conditions. Highways raised no highway concerns as it is considered the existing access would be acceptable to accommodate the increase in perceived traffic movements associated with a single holiday let. This is subject to the inclusion of conditions. Environmental Health raised comments regarding the farming and equestrian history of the site, and as no supporting information has been submitted, they've suggested that pre-commencement conditions associated with potential land contamination are attached. They also raised comments relating to noise and odour in relation to the close proximity of the equestrian activity. However, as it is in the same ownership of the equestrian use, they do not raise any concerns with this. Having taken into account all the material considerations, it is considered that the proposed development is acceptable in principle and would have an acceptable impact upon the character of the countryside. Officers are therefore making a recommendation of approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
No questions, Chair.
No, thank you. We'll move on to the first speaker then, which is the applicant, Joe Firmingham. There we go.
Hello.
Hello, you have 3 minutes and you're given a 30-second prompt before the end.
Okay.
Your time starts now.
Okay. I'm speaking in support of the planning application for the provision of the single-storey 2-bed log cabin. There is very little holiday accommodation within Wingworth Village currently, which I think is a shame due to the lovely surroundings and recreational facilities that are available in the area. And additionally, it means that if extra accommodation is needed by Wingworth residents for visiting relatives, this accommodation has to be sourced outside of the village. The application we submitted initially was for a 3-bedroomed lodge. However, concerns were raised regarding the size of the unit. So after consultation with the planning department, it was agreed to reduce the size of the original unit applied for by 40% from a 3-bedroomed to a 2-bedroomed lodge. We're happy that this size unit will be still commercially viable, and we also took the opportunity to source the building from a local company who have many years' experience of supplying these lodges in Derbyshire. The lodge is built off-site, which means that there will be minimal construction traffic other than the initial delivery of the unit to site. The holiday let will lead to job creation for someone to handle the administration and bookings and the changeover and cleaning. Concerns were raised over the smell produced by the equestrian use of the site. I can say that the fields have a small number of ponies grazing them, and in inclement winter weather or during very hot weather, they use the stables to provide shelter from the wet or shade from the sun. Any manure produced whilst the ponies are stabled is removed by trailer from the site, as this was agreed in the previous planning for the stables. Therefore, there is very little smell arising from the horses, and I think most people would love to be able to see ponies grazing from their accommodation. Prospective customers will certainly be advised of this, as for many people this will be a selling point. It is not intended, however, to allow guests to bring their own horses, as the equestrian facilities are for private use only, as specified in the previously granted planning permission. With regards to concerns over future development, as a family, we're committed to this site being maintained as a green space within the village and to preserving the unimproved flower-rich hay meadow in the bottom area of the site.
30 seconds remaining.
This is an important habitat for many plant and animal species, and the land is very different from much of the local grassland, which is fertilised and sown with single species, protein-rich grasses, suitable for cow silage and therefore lacking in the diversity which is now so important to the natural environment. I support the officer's recommendation and hope that the committee are also able to approve the proposal. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
No questions, Chair.
Thank you. And we have one more speaker, the agent, Stephen Bright.
Hello, thank you, Chair. I'm the agent for Mr. and Mrs. Cocker. Has the time started? Sorry, have you?
Yes, I do beg your pardon. I couldn't get my mic to work. So you've got
sorry.
3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the proposed development seeks outline permission for the provision of a single-storey 2-bed log cabin for holiday let purposes on land at New Road, Wingerworth. The site forms part of a private equestrian facility comprising stabling, menage, grazing land and associated uses. The proposed log cabin is a 2-bed glade with a central living area, which will be provided by Pine Log Bakewell, who supply the same units on the Darwin Forest holiday village near Matlock. The original application detailed a 3-bed cabin, but following concerns that it was too large, it was revised to a 2-bed cabin. This reduced the overall size of the unit from 19.62 metres by 6.42 metres to 12.3 by 6.8 metres, which also allowed for the proposed curtilage around the cabin to be similarly amended, and the parking spaces reduced from 3 to 2, which is in line with the Derbyshire County Council requirements for a 2-bed house. The cabins are constructed off-site at the company's factory from timber obtained from renewable sources, and the use of a local company will enhance the sustainability of the project. The cabin has been designed to sit within the natural contours of the site to ensure that it is not visible from New Road, and the retention of existing mature hedgerows will also provide additional screening. In addition, the timber construction will fit sympathetically within the site and complement the existing stable complex. A future Reserve Matters application will determine the final appearance of the log cabin, site layout and landscaping of the immediate curtilage. We understand from conversations and information provided by the local tourist information centre in Chesterfield that demand for this type of holiday accommodation will be high due to its location within easy reach of the Peak District National Park and surrounding places of interest. In conclusion, It is considered that the development will have no detrimental impact on the area and provides a satisfactory design solution which will blend sensitively within the semi-rural surroundings. We therefore support the officer's recommendation and commend the proposal to the committee for your approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
No questions, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move on. I'll open the floor to debate.
Sorry, Chair, it's any questions to officers at this point?
Sorry, I was ahead of myself. Are there any questions to officers?
No questions, Chair.
No. I'll open the floor for debate.
Councillor Pam Windley, Chair.
Sorry, Nikki. Councillor Windley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very familiar with this stretch of road. I've been living in the next village. My concern about this is where it's going to be, and the fact that that road is not good. The traffic that goes along there is, well, it's awful at times, and the school is only just a short way down, and cars are parking to the left-hand side as you're going down there. What kind of a turn in or turn out would this present, I'm wondering, for anybody using and not familiar with this area? Thank you. That's my thoughts.
Thank you. I do share some of those, knowing that the parish rooms is opposite and the traffic on the road, parking on the road. But we're here to discuss the application and what people think of it. So if there's no further debate on it, oh, hang on, Councillor Armitage.
Thank you, Chair. As I look at it, it's development in the countryside, and it goes against W2 of the Wingerworth Neighbourhood Plan, and also the emerging local plan of SS9, and it would impact on the landscape character of the area, and that's covered in SDC 3. I'm not happy about it because of all these things, and also GS6. So that's my thoughts.
Any further thoughts?
No indications to speak, Chair.
Please do.
Apologies, Chair, there are no members indicating they wish to speak.
Thank you. If there's no other further questions or comments, we'll move to the vote or the motion, if anyone's prepared to put in a motion.
Councillor Roger Hall, Chair.
Yeah, good afternoon. Was that a motion by Councillor Armitage?
No, I didn't.
I believe it was just a comment.
It was a comment.
Oh, okay.
As things stand here, there is no motion.
Where do we go from here? If there's no motion, do I take it that that then is conditionally passed?
No, Chair.
So you have Councillor Andrew Cooper and Councillor Maggie Jones wishing to speak.
Could I move the motion, please, for officers' recommendations?
Is that for the officers' recommendations, Councillor Cooper?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Have we a seconder for that? I've totally lost the plot.
I think it's Councillor Hartshorn as seconding.
Councillor Hartshorn?
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Okay. With that, I'll hand it over to the facilitator for roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that this is to conditionally approve the application. If we will now commence a roll call, if members could clearly say for, against or abstain. Councillor Armitage,
Against.
Councillor Cooper,
For.
Councillor Foster,
For.
Councillor Hall,
Against.
Councillor Hartshorn,
For.
Councillor Huckabee, I'm just going to give you a prompt to unmute, Councillor Huckabee.
Against.
Councillor Jones, Councillor Maggie Jones,
For.
Councillor Liggett, Councillor Liggett, just double checking that the mic in the chamber is working. Councillor Liggett,
Against.
Councillor Powell,
Against.
Councillor Reader,
For.
Councillor Rouse,
Against.
Councillor Ruff
Against.
and Councillor Windley.
Against.
Okay, Chair, that is 5 votes for and 8 against with 0 abstentions, so the motion falls.
Thank you. We do seem to be having problems with mics in here.
Thank you, Chair. I'll get somebody down
Yeah.
to sort that out for you.
Would it helpful, Chair, if I actually read out the guidance on motions again, just whilst member consider the next steps?
Could do, yep.
Okay. Right, thanks, Chair. Please bear in mind, members, as you've just seen, a motion must be moved and seconded before a vote is taken. If an amendment for a motion is moved and seconded, then the amendment will be voted on first. If a motion is to be moved which goes against the officer recommendation, then the member who has moved the motion must give the reasons for doing so. The reasons for moving a motion against officer recommendations should comprise the relevant planning issues and
Alan, you're muted.
Sorry, Chair, do apologise. Shall I just start again? So effectively, just really to tell you that if a motion is to move which goes against officer recommendations, then the member who has moved the motion must give the reasons for doing so. The reasons for moving a motion against officer recommendations should comprise the relevant planning issues and be supported by the evidence as necessary. If a motion to reject officer recommendations fails, or in other words is not passed, that doesn't mean that the recommendation are automatically approved. Rather, you will need to take a positive decision through a further motion in favour of the recommendations or another course of action. This will need to be approved by the committee through another vote. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I take it we are okay with where we've passed now. We can move on to the next application.
No, Chair, no decision's been taken on this.
Right, okay.
The proposal and seconding and the motion has failed, so there now needs to be a new proposition put forward.
Councillor Armitage, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I would go against officer's recommendation, and the reasons being are it's against SX and W2, also development in the countryside, and that's to do with the Wingerhood neighbourhood plan. So those are my reasons.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Roger. Can we now have a roll call for a vote?
Yeah, so as I understand, Chair, essentially it's to reject the application against offers of recommendations on the grounds of inappropriate development in the countryside. Is that the essence of it?
I
Not sure if
believe
you want to
so.
say anything, Richard?
Yeah, I was just going to say that tourism-related development in the countryside is an acceptable form of development, and in this particular case, it is probably the least impactful sort of tourism development that would be that is being proposed. So I think you need to be identifying some very specific reason as to why this particular development is unacceptable in this particular location, as opposed to simply believing that it's contrary to it's inappropriate development in the countryside.
Right. Okay. I think it goes against the landscape character of SDC 3 also.
Councillor Powell?
On that point, if we look at the report on 7.4, it says policy 11 states that the proposals for new tourist accommodation in countryside locations will be permitted where they involve the reuse and conversion of existing buildings or extension of existing tourist facilities only. So it would seem to me that this isn't a reuse of an existing building or a conversion.
I agree with that, Councillor Powell. That's policy 11.
I think, as you'll see in the subsequent policy, it's considered that is an out-of-date policy, but and I'd emphasise that the need to identify a particular characteristic where this is harmful in this particular location.
Well, I think it is harmful in this particular location.
So as things stand, Chair, the motion is to move against offers of recommendations and reject the application on the grounds that it has a harmful impact on the surrounding countryside area. Is that the essence of it at the moment?
I believe so. Is that correct, Councillor Armitage?
Yeah, that's correct, Chair.
Thank you. Can we have a seconder?
The seconder was Councillor Hall.
Councillor Hall, lovely.
You still
Okay,
comfortable with that, Councillor Hall?
Yeah, I'm happy with it.
Thank you. Can we then move to the vote?
Thank you, Chair. If members can say for, against or abstain for rejection of the application. Councillor Armitage.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
Against.
Councillor Foster.
Abstain.
Councillor Hall.
For.
Councillor Hartshorn.
Against.
Councillor Huckabee. Councillor Huckabee. I'll just pop a prompt in your script. There you are. You're unmuted.
Against.
Councillor Jones.
Against.
Councillor Liggett. Councillor Liggett, we're not able to hear you through that mic.
Severe problems with microphones. For.
Councillor Powell. Councillor Powell, you're muted.
For.
Councillor Reader.
I'm against, but can I just say, before we took the vote, I indicated twice that I wanted to speak before we went to this vote. So I'm really disappointed that I wasn't picked up.
Apologies, Councillor Reader, but you're just in a black void for us at this end of the screen.
I've indicated to the facilitator as well that I wanted to speak twice, and I've been ignored both times.
My apologies to you, Councillor Reader. I did miss that indication. Chair, would you like for me to continue with the vote?
Yes, please.
Councillor Rouse.
Against.
Councillor Ruff.
For.
Councillor Windley.
Against.
Chair, that is 5 votes for, 7 against, with 1 abstention, and that motion falls.
Pat Mantis was against that. Wingerway.
Right, where do we go from here?
Well, as things stand, Chair, the application is not determined.
Okay.
Sorry, Councillor Reader. Chair, Councillor
Councillor Reader.
Thank you. What I was going to say before we took the vote is we need to be mindful that this is an outline planning application. I also know that stretch of road, having travelled it very, very often to get into work. I'm not certain of how much traffic just people on holiday would create just from that one lodge. You know, the bookings will probably be controlled by the applicant or whoever they put into place. It's 2 bedrooms, so I'm assuming that would mean only probably 2 car movements. So I'm not 100% sure that that would create too much really in unnecessary traffic. But I believe because it's an outline planning application, we have the opportunity here to set down what our concerns are and let the applicant know that and go back and work on it if we really need to in order to move this forward.
Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I put my hand up earlier as well, and it was the same kind of reasons, but also when we did the site visit, which was on virtual, it was stated that it can't really be seen from the road. So I don't think it's going to make a big impact on the countryside in that area. And as Councillor Reader said, if it's just a small family, 2-bedroomed accommodation, it's not going to be an awful lot of extra traffic.
So is there a new motion? Can I put a motion then is that we defer this for further consultation? Could someone second that motion?
Yeah, I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. Can we have a roll call now, please, Nikki?
Of course, Chair. I've got a number of members putting hands up. Is that for a show of hands or wanting to speak?
I'd like to speak.
Apologies,
Councillor
Chair.
Powell, then Councillor Huckleby.
Yes, Chair, I'm just wondering what the purpose of a deferment would serve. If you could explain that for me.
We seem to be at a loggerhead, so I'm just wondering if we could have the application tightened up and the concerns that have been raised addressed and submitted back to the committee. Otherwise, I think we're just going to be going round and round in circles. Councillor Windley?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I commented on the road. It wasn't so much as the residents that, or the holiday makers that would be using the lodge. It was more of where I think the entrance and exit is to come out of that. That was my concerns when I mentioned how busy it can get on that road. So just to clarify, that was my meaning on that. Is the entrance and exit opposite that junction?
No, it's to the right. If you're coming out
to the right.
Yeah, if you're coming out of Long Edge Lane, it's to the right of the junction. If you're coming up of Hill Houses, it would be to the left.
Yes, yeah. So it's in quite a busy area as they're coming in and going out. Yes, thank you. Yeah, that was my point I was making, not about how many cars would be going in and out of there. Thank you.
You've got an indication from Emily Cartwright, the planning officer on this, and Tracy Reader, Councillor Tracy Reader wishes to speak.
Okay. Emily?
Okay, could I just clarify with Councillor Windley, please?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you, Councillor. It's an existing access, so there would be no new access. It's just that would be intensified by the holiday let, which would have a maximum of 2 bedrooms, and Highways have raised no concerns regarding this.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Reader?
Yeah, could I just ask the planning officers, because it is outlined, is there any possibility of addressing some of the concerns that councillors have now today with the applicant, if they're willing, rather than deferring the application?
I think we do need to identify what the concerns are in relation to the matter of principle, which is what an outline application needs to establish. I mean, we do have knowledge that this is going to be a log cabin, so there's not a lot of sort of design issues that still need to be determined. Although, yes, there are the actual details of that cabin that we need to that we'll need to see, but it's not. There's not a lot of great scope of range of designs that would be there that we might think are unacceptable or acceptable, given that we can be pretty sure that it's going to be have a bit more design quality to it than the stables that are there, for instance. In terms of the access, I think that point has now just been cleared up, in as much as it has been just confirmed that it is the same access. We're talking about people coming in and out from there in probably the most minimal numbers of vehicles that could be possible for such a development. It's difficult to see what more additional information, certainly from the debate that we've had so far, could really be needed if it was going to be deferred. But clearly we've had a proposal to grant planning permission and a proposal to refuse planning permission, both of which have been lost. So it really is in your gift to try and illuminate us as to what your concerns are and what specifically more information you feel is needed and would be the purpose of a deferral.
Chair, Councillor Hartshorn's indicating his wish to speak.
Councillor Hartshorn?
Thank you, Chair. As I see it, I don't really see that we've got any grounds to refuse this. It's an outline application. We're wanting to generate a visitor strategy within the area, and then we're going to kick this out. You know, we want to be bringing money into the area, not just dismissing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reader?
Yeah, I think I have to agree. I think it's like Councillor Jones was saying, it's screened from the main area. It's trying to keep with the fact that it's in the countryside. It's going to be of a log presentation, which indicates wood to me, so which is indicative of a countryside feel. I think the movements around how many people are going to be there is minimal, because it's a holiday let. So it's 2 bedrooms. So you're probably going to be looking at a maximum of 4 people, which is probably just either 1 or 2 cars. I think it's an existing access, which you've addressed already through what we've been discussing. It's an existing access. I don't know how many ponies are kept on that site, but I'm guessing there'll be vehicle movements already going into that site. So I can't see where there would be any highways issues. So, Chair, I'm at a loss of why we would be refusing it. I'm very similar to Councillor Hartshorn.
Okay, are there any other comments on this, Councillor Powell?
I would just suggest, through the chair, that any 1 or 2 of the 7 people who voted against the last motion would be invited to propose a new one, which is more in line with what they've been thinking.
Well, just in terms of that, Chair, I've just had a message from Jim. I think we might actually now be in a position where we'll need to suspend council procedure rules in order to actually vote again.
Yeah, so if I could speak, this isn't the first time where we've been in this situation where we've had a proposal to grant permission refused, and then a proposal to refuse planning permission turned down on the same application. So what you can't normally do in accordance with council procedure rules is vote on the same matter at the same meeting. However, in order to get around that, what you can do is suspend council procedure rules, and then which would enable you to then have a further motion on either to grant or refuse planning permission, and then take a vote in the normal way. So you would need to, before you do that, you would need to take a vote as to whether to suspend council procedure rules to enable you to proceed.
Thank you. Are we all in agreement to move that we suspend the rules? Nikki, we'll need
Is that a
to have
consensus?
Members, could you raise your hands for?
Get rid of this, otherwise it's gone forever.
Chair, all the members voting remotely have voted for suspension.
I'm sorry, Nikki, I didn't hear that.
All the members voting remotely voted for suspension of the council procedure rules. So it's just yourself and Councillor Liggett.
We're both sharing a mic. We've still got issues, but there we go.
Okay, my apologies. So that would be carried to suspend council procedure rules, Chair.
Okay, so now we need another motion put forward. Oh, this is ridiculous.
Chair?
Councillor Reader?
Chair, would it be possible to move officers' recommendations to approve the application? I think we do need to move this on. I can't see, honestly, where there is an issue with this. So I would move officers' recommendations, please.
Have we a seconder for this motion?
Councillor Cooper.
Councillor Cooper?
Yes, Chair. Having moved the motion initially, then I'm happy to second Councillor Reader's motion. I've not heard anything like Councillor Reader that's made me change my mind. In fact, anything else, it's reaffirmed exactly what I thought in the first place. So I'm not sure why we're looking to turn this down, actually. So yes, I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Nikki, can we have a vote now, please?
Of course,
So just
Chair.
to be clear, Chair, The vote, the motion is to approve officer recommendations to approve the planning application.
Thank you.
If members could clearly say for, against or abstain. Councillor Armitage.
Against.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Foster.
For.
Councillor Hall.
Abstain.
Councillor Hartshorn.
For.
Councillor Huckabee.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Liggett.
Against.
Just to confirm, Councillor Liggett, that was against. Councillor Powell.
Against.
Councillor Reader.
For.
Councillor Rouse.
For.
Councillor Ruff.
Abstain.
Councillor Windley. Councillor Windley.
Against.
Chair, with 8 votes for, 3 against and 2 abstentions, that motion is carried.
Thank you all very much. And we can move on to the next application, which is for 20/00506/TPO. This is the application for removal of 41 poplars covered by TPO number 6 in various stages of decline. Excuse me. And this is at Old Tupton. The officer would like to give their presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Just to let you know, there was a late representation from a Mr. Muldoon, which was sent out in the late reps to members yesterday. Nikki, are you okay to do the presentation? Thank you. So this is an application to fell 41 poplars which are in various stages of decline due to their age, location and health. Have the next slide, please. The trees are located on the Anchor Bowl Road site, which has permission for 193 dwellings. They're on the boundary with the dwellings known as the Poplars and the Gables. The trees are covered by an area TPO, the Group A1 of the NEDDC TPO 6, which was made in 1980. Next slide, please. The area TPO runs from the road to the east for approximately 100 metres westwards. It is approximately 20 metres wide. A hedge runs below the area of trees to the south and forms the boundary with the poplars and the gables. This hedge is not subject to TPO. Indeed, hedges cannot be subject to TPOs. The TPO protects trees which make a significant contribution to the amenity of the area. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the trees when viewed from inside the development site. Can I have the next slide, please? A tree survey was commissioned by the applicant in 2019. This classed the group of trees as category C, low quality. Next slide, please. The reasons for removal have been given that the 41 poplars are in poor condition and decline and have considerable amounts of dead wood in the crown and are showing signs of canker. Next slide, please. The council's parks officer agrees with this assessment, and these photos show that the trees are not in best condition. The Arboricultural Association guidance suggests that the average natural life of poplars is around 50 to 70 years. It's likely that these trees were at least 10 to 20 years old when they were TPO'd, which makes them around 50 to 60 years old now. They are therefore likely to be coming to the end of their natural life. Next slide, please. The applicant proposes to replace the trees with 14 specimens of mixed, mostly native species, such as field maple, oak, lime, birch, and a few poplars. The justification for replacement with fewer trees is that these species have a lower, wider shape and therefore need more space to thrive. These species have been suggested by the Parks Officer as they should be longer lived than the poplars, and by providing a mixture of native species will add to the biodiversity of the site. The Parks Officer is in agreement with the quantity and layout proposed. Next slide, please. You can see that the trees are prominent when viewed from Ankerbold Road. And the next slide, please. However, their condition reduces their attractiveness and therefore their amenity. Next slide. This just shows them again from Ankerbold Road. And then the next slide, please. Thank you. This aerial photo shows that the trees do help to screen the Ankerbold Road development site from the gables and the poplars. Next slide, please. This photo shows the trees to the north of the entrance to the gables and the poplars. So that's the entrance just there. And the next slide, please. It is officers' view that whilst there may be short-term impact on the neighbours as a result of the loss of the trees, the new planting coupled with proposed management of this hedge approved in the landscaping scheme for the development site will mitigate the impact. Next slide, please. Again, this slide shows that the trees are not in good shape. There may be a short-term impact on biodiversity due to the loss of trees. However, this will be mitigated by the long-term improvement as a result of the introduction of a mixture of native trees to the area. The replacement trees will be around 3 to 3.5 metres high and have a girth of 10 to 12 centimetres. These have been agreed by the tree officer as being a suitable trade-off between providing young trees of a size which will mitigate the loss of mature trees and ensuring they're able to survive the move to this location. The replacement trees will be covered by the TPO. The applicant has indicated that they intend to plant more trees outside of the area covered by the TPO, but because this is an area TPO rather than a woodland one, it is not possible to condition the planting of replacement or additional trees outside of the area. However, if this TPO application is allowed, an application to vary the landscaping condition of the planning permission for the development will have to be submitted, and any further tree planting along with additional management of the hedge will be included in this. So the remaining photos further illustrate the location, visibility and condition of the trees. And taking into account the information above, it is considered that the proposal is acceptable and officers are recommending approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I can't see anybody on the screen at this present time. Oh, there we go. Are there any questions for the officer?
No members indicating, Chair.
Well, you did well, Alice. Okay, we're moving on to the speakers. We've got representation from both ward members, David Hancock and Ross Shipman. I believe we've got their statements to be read out.
Chair, Councillor, and David Hancock's now in the meeting and so will be able to read his own statement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Chair. I have numerous concerns in regard to this application, most significantly in regard to the impact removal of these trees will have on local biodiversity. I've already questioned the legitimacy of contradictory reports which have been used to justify this application versus that which was originally submitted. At the very least, I would urge members to defer any decision pending a wholly independent report being provided. Given the planning authority's vested financial interest in this development, any report submitted by the Parks Department, no matter how much faith we have in the integrity of individual officers, cannot in any meaningful sense be considered not to be a conflict of interest. As members will appreciate, even trees in a state of decay are vital to an area's biodiversity and should only legitimately be removed where they present a threat to safety. Only 2 weeks ago, I was taken on a tour of the perimeter of this site by the project manager, and there is absolutely no evidence of that being the case. I also wish to take issue with our planning officers who in their report have attempted to dismiss my concerns about flooding as irrelevant. That is a complete distraction, as even an infant is aware of the vital role that trees play in water absorption and flood mitigation. The attempt to divert the Planning Committee's attention from such a vital function is a huge concern, and I urge members to use their own common sense when assessing that aspect. Disruption of wildlife is an inevitability of building works, and over the past few weeks, the site clearance has had a devastating impact on what was one of the main centres of wildlife in my ward. Hedgehogs, foxes, badgers, bats and birds are all frequent visitors to neighbouring gardens along Wingfield Road, Station New Road and Ankerbold Road. Visits from the land mammals have reduced to almost nothing over the past few weeks. Removal of these trees en masse as proposed will destroy the habitats of what little remains. Committee also needs to look at the long-term future. The applicant is proposing to replace 41 trees with just 14, a reduction of almost 2/3. Aside from the obvious impact on wildlife and the sustainability of natural habitat, it will have a significant impact on the amenity of those existing neighbouring properties and those that they're proposing to erect. There is no possible winner in this scenario beyond saving developer a bit of income. Our wildlife, habitat, existing residents, and those who will ultimately move into the new homes will all be poorer should this application be removed. I therefore urge members to reject officer recommendations and to agree only to the removal of any trees which absolutely need to be removed on health and safety grounds, following a truly independent assessment from an organisation that has no financial interest. That's me complete. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any questions? No, thank you. We'll move on to Councillor Shipman's letter.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll read it out now. I would like to state that I object to all 41 trees being removed from this location as part of this planning application. Members should be drawn to the tree survey conducted on 19th November 2020, I think that's a mistake, which states only 4 out of 41 trees are dead. In line with the District Council decision to amend the planning application in Holy Moorside for similar reasons only a few weeks ago, I believe this application should only be approved for 4 trees to be removed and for 4 additional trees to be planted elsewhere on the site to replace them. The remaining 37 trees should remain, and the Planning Committee can then have the opportunity to review any planning application in the future to remove any more. This would ensure that the Planning Committee is consistent in its approach to removing trees protected by tree preservation orders in North East Derbyshire. That's the end of the statement, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe we've got one more late representation. Is that to be read out, or was that just included in the pack?
That was included in the pack, Chair, but it's a matter for yourself as to wish the officers to read it out.
Yes, please, and that way we've all seen
Okay,
it.
if you just bear with me 1 second. Yes, this is the statement from a Mr. Muldoon, and it's in your reports, Lake Park Representations report at page 4 as neighbour comments. And the statement is as follows. I'm concerned that the applicant has not given any valid reason for the removal of these 41 trees, other than a supposition that they have assumed that the risk is high, when only 2 years ago they were classified as viable to remain under the protection of the original TPO. In my humble opinion, the only reasonable way to determine the trees are so far diseased is to take a sample number, say a maximum of 10% to be felled, and photographed by an independent witness, and a decision then taken on the rest. If it is decided to remove all of the trees, then the felling should be witnessed by photograph and recorded so as to hold to task anyone who should be proved to be wrong on the assumption. The government policy is to plant trees, not to fell established ones that are under TPOs. It is apparent that one of the reasons to fell these trees is that, other than if proved dangerous, it will be more difficult to sell the properties with the trees subject to TPO within the curtilage of the residents. This is good reason why any replacement trees should also be given TPO status should the application be approved. Were the replacements not to be restricted by TPO, the owners could fell as they pleased. The existing established trees and hedgerows are a bountiful source of wildlife with a varied number of different bird and bat species and should be retained if possible. Enough trees have already been removed on the land opposite this application with reckless abandon and will probably never be replaced. I have not seen a planting plan that includes the replanting of oak, elm, chestnut, silver birch, to name but a few of the ones felled by the applicant. Prior to the work starting on the site, we had fox, badger and numerous rabbits and several hedgehogs in our garden. We have seen none of these since the hedgerows and trees have been removed. We should be protecting fauna and wildlife, not causing their extinction. Please reject this application. And that's the end of the statement, Chair.
Thank you. There's no more speakers, so this is now the opportunity for questions to the planning manager and officers about the application. Again, I'd like to keep this part of our proceedings focused on getting clarity about any points that you are not sure of. Once we have done this, we can then have our discussion about the application based on all we've heard and read. For that reasons, members, I will continue to be grateful if you could not move any motions at this stage. Let's wait until we've all had a chance to make our assessments. Again, the same rules apply. Please mute your mics unless you wish to speak. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Windley is indicating her wish to speak, Chair.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. It's about the trees and the conflict that we seem to have in opinions of these trees. There was a survey that we were submitted in May 2019, and it gives a different opinion of the conditions of the trees to the one in July 2020 after the builders had gone back in. And I'm just wondering why this is. Why suddenly all 41 need to come down, whereas only last year that wasn't the case. We've already lost, as other people have said, a lot of the ground wildlife. Hedgehogs particularly, which are dwindling, have gone down to nothing. The hedgerows have been ripped out and the hedgehogs just scooped up and chucked wherever. That's not right. And neither is the fact that boundaries to hedgerows for residents are being taken out. This needs proper consultation, and that's not right either. We're going to lose a lot of birds. It's not that long since I looked up our skies, and I'm on Wingfield Road, to see a Harris hawk gliding across. That's not something that we've been seeing in Tupton, and this is all thanks to the Avenue washlands. Those trees down there will be providing a nesting place for some of these birds that we've now got coming. So I'm just wondering why this conflict is of the timescale of the trees. And I agree with what's been said before, that they should have an independent assessment. Somebody else needs to go in there and look at it again. And at least then we may have a clearer indication. And if that indication is, yeah, there to go, then that's fine, as long as they're replaced by other trees that's going to give the same kind of security to the wildlife. Thank you.
Would you like me to address some of these points, Chair?
Yes, please, if you would.
Okay. Starting with the point there that Councillor Windley mentioned, but it's also the starting point that for Councillor Hancock, and that was in relation to contradictory reports. My understanding of the difference between the tree survey originally carried out and now is that since outline planning permission has been granted, they start to look at the implementation of the scheme, but they're realizing that really these trees are going to be far more difficult to manage when there are trees, so when there are houses built on the other side than they are now. But certainly they are going to be in needing within the next few years at least to have serious management or removal. The original proposal was to do some pruning and to slowly take them out, but it's felt that really grabbing the bull by the horns here and doing all the work and then giving the maximum period of time for the new trees to become established rather than doing it slowly is the best way of approaching this. The second point that that has been raised, one of Councillor Hancock's points, the local planning authority is all people around this table, around this screen, and the local planning authority's role is to make a decision in relation to the application that is before them. The local planning authority does not have a financial interest in these trees coming out or not. The local planning authority needs to make a balanced decision in relation to the trees. The issue relating to trees and the flooding. During the course of this development, and once completed, the entire hydrology of this field will change, and it will become more of a managed hydrology and drainage scheme, and so that will have a big impact on water movement across the site. It's not a case of saying that it's a red herring in relation to these trees. Clearly, these trees are deteriorating, and the faster they deteriorate, the less impact they will have in terms of absorbing water from the ground. And so having new trees planted, which are going to then require a good water, a good moisture level in the soil to be able to grow, will actually have an improved situation in relation to that particular part of the site's ability to hold water and for those trees to actually make the most of that water. I think, as Alice has mentioned in her own introduction, there will be a short-term reduction in the amount of habitat in that area because of the work that they're doing. But the bolstering and thickening of the hedge there, and as the new trees of a species that is more able to support wildlife, that will start to come back. And clearly, the sooner that those trees are in and being able to grow to maturity, the better. And yes, there could well be an element of loss of privacy until those trees start to build their canopy. But again, the sooner these are put in, the sooner this impact will be experienced. There was mention to the recent Holy Moorside application, and members will be aware that really every application must be considered on its own merits, but also when it comes to trees, the individual health of a tree and its own particular ecology in that area and its own context, it will be unique. And so you'll need to be very cautious about saying, well, it came to a balanced decision at Holy Moorside, there could be a balanced decision here. We must be looking at this application in its entirety for trying to make a decision. And the final point was there's mention of giving approval for the removal of 4 dead trees and having replanted trees required to be put in. You don't need listed building, the tree preservation order consent to remove dead trees. If trees are dead, you can just take them down without the need for that consent anyway. So this is really, yes, there may well be some totally dead trees within these 41, but they're looking at removing all of them as a group. And some of them may not actually need to be given that sort of consent if they are actually dead. I think that's answered all the points that I thought needed to be answered.
Councillor Liggett.
Richard, it says Parks Department comments. Can you tell me exactly which person went out to assess these trees?
I can't give you the actual precise officer, but we do rely on the Parks Department for inspection of trees, and as in due course we'll be wanted to have expertise within the planning department, but that would be to supplement the advice that we get from the parks officers.
It's just you happen to bring up Holy Moorside. And I asked then who'd been out, and I was told, I can't remember the lady's second name, but Kate, somebody. And I checked afterwards, and apparently Kate, sorry, I can't remember her surname, is actually street scene coordinator. She has absolutely nothing to do with trees, and that was the lady who had assessed the Holy Moorside trees, and that is why this worries me. And I feel very strongly that if TPOs are put on trees, then it should be a TPO officer that goes and says if trees need to be taken down.
Chair, you have indications to speak from Councillors Armitage, Windley and Powell.
We'll take them in that order. Councillor Armitage first.
Thank you, Chair. I listened to the reasoning from the planning officer, which I don't accept at all. I'm qualified. Well, I went to university, and one of the courses I did was on forestry and forestry management, and I've since been on various courses to keep me up to date. The latest one I went was a course by DALC on tree management. What you don't realise is this: when you put a poplar tree for a start, it's a pretty dangerous tree. You can't use the usual root management and root protection area for a poplar. The roots go for miles. Well, not for miles. Let's say 30 or 40 feet outside what is the recognised root protection area. And as a result, if you put them near a building, you're likely to get the root coming up in the middle of your dining room, or undermining walls, or damaging drainage pipes. And for that reason, you have to allow for this, and it will result in a number of houses less on these sites. Now, I've seen this on a number of places where a application is granted. You put the buildings on the plan right up to the extremities. The result is, after a few weeks, they come back and they say, oh, could we have permission to prune or can we take it away? We saw this, I've seen it in Ashover, and I've seen it only the last time at Holy Moorside. We come up with all the excuses. Now, we have TPOs to protect the area, and here we have 41. Not all 41 are going to be past it, you know, when we're talking average ages, 50 to 70 years old. Well, you know, I'm 70 years old and I'm not past it. And it's time you took notice of people who know about trees and not by street scene people who you're going to have. We've asked for an independent report, and we need an independent report. We mentioned about the hedgehogs and the wildlife. Did you take any notice of David Attenborough's report saying that in so many years, by 2050, 50% of the wildlife will be killed? When did you last see a hedgehog? I saw one the other day in my garden. It's the first I've seen for years, literally. They used to be on the side of the road, splattered. You never see one now because they've all been destroyed. And the biggest factor was that destroyed them was the motor car. Let's say about the hawks. Hawks like to go in big tall trees, like a poplar. We've had a decline, the hawk population has declined. We've blamed everything else apart from the habitat. We've got the other habitats of foxes and things like that. What happens? You drive them out of the countryside because you are destroying the habitat in which they're living. And the result is that they end up in people's gardens, pulling dustbins out, killing somebody's cat or somebody's rabbit. Please, just think again. We don't want to be destroying our habitat for the environment. And that's what you're doing by allowing people to take down trees which are covered by a TPO. The TPO was put there for a reason, to conserve it. And please take notice of it.
Thank you. Councillor Reader.
Chair, you had indications to speak from Councillors Windley and Powell, Lee Hartshorn and Maggie Jones.
Councillor Windley.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually just to go back to the graph that we've been submitted from the tree survey in 2019, when the recording was 20 fair, 20 good and 2 poor, and the contribution, which I'm taking, was the contribution to the land and the length of time were 31 trees and considered long. So again, I go back to why it's suddenly only 12, 14 months on, they only cutting down. There is still, if you look at that graph, that's what it says on the graph there. And I have concerns. I do really think that we need it to be looked at again, to be reassessed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Move on to the next speaker, Councillor Hartshorn.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've just got a question for Richard, a couple of questions for Richard. Will the, we've obviously got this area that's covered by a TPO. Will that form part of the garden of individual houses when this development's complete? That's my first question. And my other question is why you've agreed to accept this when we've got with the replacement of only 14 trees and the destruction of 41. Such a massive reduction in trees. I can't understand why that's been accepted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I'll let Alice get onto the screen the the layout again with Nikki's assistance in a minute to show you the layout and to confirm that these would be within the back gardens of some of those trees, of some of those houses, and then there'll be there are a few down at the far end which are in a small area of open space. What I would say is that, and again, Alice did touch on this in her presentation, is that the form of poplar trees is very columnar, very upright, and therefore, in terms of the sort of airspace that they need, is not as broad as would be the case with an oak or horse chestnut or something like that. So that is the reason why we have such a difference between 41 taken out and 14 being replaced. And of course, with the movement or the direction of lifespan of these existing trees, 4 may well be dead at the moment, but that is the direction that these trees are going to be heading in. By the time all of them have died, we could have had in place another 10 or 15 years of growth of trees that are going to be there to replace them, and so that's another factor to bear in mind. But just one final point: I think if the committee does feel in doubt about the advice from our parks department and from the applicant's own arboriculturist, such that an independent advice needs to be obtained, then and you wanted to defer it for that reason, then that's it's not an unprecedented line to take.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Councillor Powell, Chair.
Councillor Powell.
Can I just say as a side that I am very disappointed that one of the speakers has impugned the reputation and integrity of one of our own officers by claiming a conflict of interest. I think that is seriously disappointing. And somebody asked for the name of that individual. I think that name should not be made public.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. So noted.
Councillor
Are there any
Jones,
other?
Apologies, Chair. Councillor Jones was indicating her wish to speak.
Councillor Jones? Where is she? I can't see her. Oh, there she is.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You know, this Derbyshire District Council, we've already said about climate change and how it is a priority for us. And climate change that is offset by trees, mature trees. Now, I was very upset to hear the first part of the presentation, the word attractiveness. It's not about attractiveness, it's about tree maturity and what they're doing to the atmosphere, aiding us. And we need to be looking after mature trees as well as planting lots and lots more trees, not taking any down. And the habitat, yeah, exactly. We're now losing loads of animals. The whole world is changing. And do we want that as an inheritance for our children? No, we don't. So can't we just forget about attractiveness, let the trees grow, plant more trees. As they die off, we can replant with something different that's going to be more in line with British oak or whatever. But I just think taking down 41 trees is really something I could never, ever support. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there
Chair,
any more?
you have 2 indications to speak, Councillor Hall and Councillor Foster.
Hello, yeah, good afternoon. In order to try and move progress, could I suggest, as it's already been advised to us, that we can ask for another independent report on the trees and defer this, please?
Okay. Thank you. We have one other speaker and then we'll move on that. Where is he? I can't see them.
Councillor Foster wished to speak, Chair.
Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Chair. I'm no expert on trees at all, unlike some people on here. So what I tend to do is trust the information that's been put in front of me. And I've trusted what Alice Lockett said, and I trust the park officer's opinion that it's accurate, because that's what we do. We trust the information that's in front of us. That's not to say that if people on here have got real doubts about them, that I wouldn't support an independent review of the trees. But as it stands, I would trust what's written here, that the life of the trees for poplars is 50 to 70 years old. These are already 50 to 60 years old, many in poor condition. I can see the condition of the trees. For myself, just looking at this report, and from what I've heard from Ms. Lockett, for me, I'd be taking advantage and getting the new trees planted, and especially as they'll be covered by TPO as well. That in conjunction with them being native species, and although the poplar is a naturalized species, it's not a native species. So that's the way I'm inclined to go, that we take advantage. We get these native mature trees that can take the place of these old dying trees, if they are in that condition. And that's me trusting what the Parks Department have said. So that'd be my view. I'd be happy to follow officers' recommendations, but hey, I'm no expert in trees, apart from I've cut down a few.
Thank you. We have now got a motion on the table, but first of all, I'd ask the clerk to go through the correct procedure for a motion.
Now, Chair, as things stand at the moment, we've had 2 suggestions for motions. I don't think actually either of them been seconded.
Thank you. Councillor Hall has put on a recommendation for a motion that we defer this for an independent review. Is there a seconder for this? Seconded by Councillor Liggett. Fine. We will now have to take a vote on that. I believe that's correct.
Yeah, so essentially the motion appears to be to defer in order to get further independent advice on the state of the trees, so that a decision can then be taken. Is that the essence of it, Chair?
I do believe so. Is that correct, Councillor Hall?
Yeah, yes, that's correct. To defer it and then get further advice or a survey or report on them. Thank you.
Thank you. So we now have a motion to put forward.
Before that, Chair, Councillor Foster's indicating to speak.
Councillor Foster?
Thanks, Chair. I do appreciate you letting me come in there. We'll get more of these in the future. Can we make sure that we do monitor this and see what comes back and see how it compares to our own Parks Department comments? So is there a possibility, Chair, that this issue could be brought back? I know this case will be brought back, this application will be brought back, but can we make sure that we get a chance to discuss this so we can compare these independent comments? Because what I'm fearful of is that in future, this becomes a standard thing, that if people don't want trees cut down, they'll ask for an independent view, and it'll take the faith of people, perhaps residents, perhaps councillors, away from what our Parks Department is doing, and it's their job to do that. So what I don't want to do is erode the faith that I have in our officers and the job they do. And what I don't want to do is encourage this each time one comes up that people object to. So every time you've got one's got an objection against trees being cut down, we call for an independent. It's going to cost the council a lot of money, and we have to be careful about what money we spend and how we spend it. So let's bring this issue back and we actually look at it. I don't know if if we can add it onto a planning agenda, and we can compare exactly what is done, and then in future we can have faith in those officers' recommendations, because we don't want this happening each time. And also, I'd echo Councillor Powell's comments. We don't bring individual officers into this public meeting and question their judgment. This is not the place. Thank you.
Thank you,
Add something which just will help just take what Councillor Foster just said a bit further. We have recently had approval from Cabinet to recruit a planning authority arboriculturalist on a part-time basis. What we get from the Parks team, I believe, is fine as far as it goes, but it is an informal arrangement with them. And there are cases such as this one, such as other cases that you'll all be familiar with, where far more detailed information and more time needs to be given to these things. And that's where we feel that we need to have our own in-house resource to be able to dedicate to that, rather than rely on the Parks team. I think the Parks team are brilliant in being able to give us those initial assessments, but I think that they don't have the time to give us what we really need for some of the more complicated ones. And so we are going to be in the process of recruiting our own internal expert for that. And of course, as a local planning authority's arboriculturalist, that is really, as I would see it, as being an independent professional.
Thank you. I'm sure we can take that forward, Mark. I think it's quite an important issue, and you're right, we don't need to keep going round and round in circles every time one comes back. So we will take that on board. So we have got the motion forwarded by Councillor Hall and seconded by Councillor Liggett to postpone this hearing until we've had an independent review.
So that's an independent assessment of the health and viability of the trees.
That's the one.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. If there's no further comment, Nikki, I'd like to go to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. So I will go through in order of alphabetical order. If you could indicate for, against, or abstain. Councillor Armitage.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Foster.
For.
Councillor Hall.
For.
Councillor Hartshorn.
For.
Councillor Huckabee. Councillor Huckabee.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Liggett. Councillor Powell.
For.
Councillor Reader.
For.
Councillor Rouse.
For.
Councillor Ruff.
For.
Councillor Windley.
For.
That's 13 votes for, Chair, 0 against, 0 abstentions. That's carried.
So the consideration of the application has been deferred.
Yes, thank you for an independent.
Chair. Chair.
Councillor Foster?
Any chance of just a 5-minute break, quickly?
You may certainly, yes.
Thank
no
you.
problem. If we're back here by 3:50, very latest, please.
Thank you, members. If you'd be kind enough just to mute yourselves and turn your cameras off until you're back in the room. Chair, you're back live.
Thank you. For our last application of this afternoon is 20//166/0L. This is the outline application, all matters reserved for the erection of one detached dwelling affecting the setting of a listed building at land between Overton Lodge and Brookside Cottage at Milltown, Ashover. Over to the planning officer.
Thank you, Chair. Could we have the slides, please, Nicola?
Yes, just doing that for you now.
Thank you. Thank you. This outline application, all matters reserved, is for the erection of one detached dwelling. Next slide, please. The application site is located to the west of Jetton Street, between Overton Lodge and Brookside Cottage, and is highlighted in orange here. The application site is located outside of any defined settlement development limit and is designated as a special landscape area. It is also sited within Stars Wood and Milltown Quarry, which is a special designated local wildlife site. Could we have the next slide, please? This slide shows the location plan. The application site is identified by the red line to the west of Jetton Street, which doubles up as a public right-of-way and bridleway. To the east lies the River Amber and a further public right-of-way. We have the next one, please. Thank you. This slide shows an indicative block plan of the proposed dwelling. This shows the dwelling to be positioned to the north of the plot and fronting onto Jetton Street, with off-road parking spaces for 2 vehicles to the side. Have the next one, please. This slide shows an indicative cross-section of the proposed dwelling. As you can see from this, the dwelling would front onto Jetton Street to the east, and the land slopes up steeply to the west. Significant excavation works would be required. Could we have the next slide, please? This slide shows an indicative floor plan of the proposed 3-bedroom dwelling. Moving on to the photos. Thank you. This photo is taken from Jetton Street, looking straight on at the proposed site. As you can see, the site has been cleared apart from a handful of trees. It is noted that none of these trees were protected by a TPO. To the top of the photo is the neighbouring listed building, known as Common Bank House. This is sited in an elevated position, approximately 30 metres away from the proposed dwelling. Have the next slide, please. Thank you. This photo is taken from along Jetton Street, outside the neighbouring property, 1 Overton Lodge. In the background is the neighbouring property, Brookside Cottage. As you can see, there is a good level of screening between this dwelling and the site. Have the next one, please. Thank you. This photo is also taken from along Jetton Street, but outside the neighbouring property, Brookside Cottage, looking in the opposite direction. Next one, please. Here, the photo is taken from Jetton Street, looking back towards Falgate. The site is on the right-hand side. Can we have the last one, please? Thank you. Finally, this photo is taken from along Jetton Street, looking north. The application site is sited to the left of the photo, and the trees sited to the right are covered by a TPO. Thank you, Nicola. Outline permission is sought for a detached dwelling with all matters reserved. An indicative layout plan has been included, which shows one dwelling accessed off the west side of Jetton Street, with 2 parking spaces accessed at the southern end of the site. The application has been accompanied by a planning statement, off-site biodiversity enhancement survey and reptile survey. We've had the following comments from the consultees. Highways. They initially raised concerns relating to the emerging visibility sightlines for the parking area. Whilst noting the outline nature of the application, the agent provided a revised indicative site plan to address the visibility issues and to demonstrate how the site can be developed. The Highway Authority have now acknowledged that whilst Jetton Street is not ideal, the reasons are more inconvenience issues rather than safety issues, and therefore raised no objections. Environmental health. The site is adjacent to a former quarry use, and there are elevated concentrations of lead in soils associated with the underlying geology in this area. There is a potential for land contamination to be present. This would be addressed via a potential land contamination pre-commencement condition. Derbyshire Wildlife Trust. The details provided within the ecological assessment, site biodiversity plan and reptile survey were considered to be acceptable in securing biodiversity enhancement on site and raised no objections. The Environment Agency and lead flood team have provided comments as part of the site was covered by flood zone 2 and 3. They both initially objected on the grounds that they were covered by this flood zone. However, it's been confirmed by both that there are mapping errors and the flood zones are misaligned. It is also considered that given the fact the site lies at a level above the river, it is not deemed to be at risk from flooding. When considering the listed building, it is not considered the proposed dwelling would be read in context of the nearby listed building due to the changes in levels. And it is therefore officer opinion that the proposed dwelling would therefore preserve the setting of the listed building. Having taken into account all the material considerations, it is considered that the proposed dwelling would not accord with 3 strands of sustainable development, and is therefore an unsustainable form of development. The proposed dwelling would represent an obtrusive encroachment into the countryside and would have a detrimental impact upon the character and appearance of the special landscape area. The proposal is contrary to the aims and objectives of the development plan. As such, the principle of development is not acceptable in both local and national planning policy terms. Officers are therefore making a recommendation of refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll now move on to the speakers. I think we have 2 for this application. The first one is David Thomas.
Yep, that's me, Chair.
Mr. Thomas, you have 3 minutes to make your point, and you will be given a 30-second warning before your time is up. Your time starts now.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I've twice written to the Planning Department about this application regarding what I perceive to be a serious risk of collateral damage to the local environment and heritage. Firstly, I had fears about the flooding risk, and it's gratifying that the DCC flood risk team, in their report of the 14th of July, called for a flood risk assessment to be carried out, fully assessing the level of exposure. Until the arrival of this report, this kind of focus was conspicuous by its absence. Comment was also made about the potential presence of engineering bunds in the locality, aimed at identifying whether these form parts of the River Amber defences and their original purpose. This was my second concern. This bund, which is directly opposite the proposed development, is in fact an embankment of the former Ashover Light Railway. And if heavy construction vehicles were to be allowed through the narrow width of Jetting Street along the bund, then the potential for significant damage is easy to envisage. Indeed, this is understood to have been the reason why an application in October 2003 for work near the bund was refused. It was recognised this was a very special area and needed to be protected. A more recent follow-up was again refused on similar grounds. A report by the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust stated that had the area not been raised immediately before the planning application, as that picture showed, it would have been contributing to the overall diversity of the local wildlife site. It would seem this is what led to the off-site biodiversity enhancement scheme report. Whilst in principle the scheme has attractions, I have concerns about whether it would be delivered. I say this because on a nearby site in Jetting Street, this applicant had stated at both application and reserved matter stages that a nearby permissive footpath would be reopened post-construction and that an adjacent heritage station would be protected and on view. This undertaking was not honoured. The footpath has been permanently closed, diverting pedestrians onto a narrow lane while appreciation of the heritage building is lost to the community. The purpose of highlighting these issues is to demonstrate that the concern about threats to the local heritage is real. Hopefully the committee will refuse this application. If it is given further consideration, then the land opposite the development must be protected and with strict timing deadlines requiring the bund to be fully reinstated to preserve the environment, mitigate the risk
30
of
seconds remaining,
and protect the social history of the area. There must also be a formal condition put in place to ensure that undertakings to create an off-site biodiversity enhancement scheme are properly honoured. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
No questions, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move on to the agent, Charlotte Stainton. Hello, Charlotte. You've got your 3 minutes.
Thank you.
This is an outline application for one family home. It is an obvious infill plot with houses to each side as well as up the hill to the rear. No objections have been raised from any consultees, including the Highway Authority, Environmental Health, Environment Agency and the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust. The starting point for considering this application is the development plan, but as you know, your settlement development limits are out of date and this application must be considered with a tilted balance in favour. This means that permission should be granted unless you have evidence that the proposed house would result in significant and demonstrable harm. Your officers have not provided you with evidence of significant harm. You are advised at 7-11 that the economic and social benefits of delivering one home would be limited, but this is still a small benefit and not harm. This is not an open location and there are no medium or long distance landscape views of the site. Your officers confirm at 7:16 that the site is well screened from far-reaching views. This is not an isolated site. You have granted over 20 new dwellings within walking distance, including 4 new dwellings in this same row and 5 detached houses on the paddock to the south. Unfortunately, at 3.2, your officer has only mentioned 2 of these nearby permissions. We ask you to be consistent by granting this final infill plot to complete the row. It is intended that the house would have 2 stories and be constructed in stone to the same high quality as the houses being built on the paddock. The proposed house would not be incongruous or prominent. It would not be overdevelopment. There would be a large level patio, level lawn or allotment area to the south, and terraced and sloping lawned and landscape rear gardens. The application includes an off-site ecological enhancement scheme of the type and scale you have not seen before for a single house development. This is a significant environmental benefit of the proposal, and I can give you more details on this if you have any questions later. Other environmental benefits include the provision of new indigenous landscaping on the site, as well as making good use of this previously overgrown scrub area. The existing trees will remain. The Derbyshire Wildlife Trust has confirmed that all the ecological information is in accordance with best practice. This is an infill development which will provide
30 seconds remaining
on an empty site next to other dwellings. This would be in accordance with other houses you have granted nearby. The site is not prominent and the scheme would not harm the amenity of any neighbours. There is no evidence that this single infill house would result in harm. We ask you please to support this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
No questions, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Miss Stainton. Right, where are we now? If there's any comments now for the officers? No?
No questions, Chair.
Are we going to put a motion forward?
Do members wish to discuss first?
Does anyone have any comments, questions? Anything?
Councillor William Armitage is indicating his wish to speak.
Councillor Armitage? I've just got a blank screen here.
Thank you, Chair. As it's been mentioned, there are a number of sites along that road which we have allowed, and we have to be consistent. There's no significant harm, and providing that, well, you can't see it from anywhere unless you have a helicopter, because it's surrounded by trees and one thing and another. I think some of the trees that are there already, you need to put some more trees round them because it's so you don't get any wind damage, because the way it's being cleared, the site, if you do that, if you don't do it, you could get wind blow problems. So I've no problem with this site. No one else seems to have. There's been 2 objections. One of them was regarding the bung. Well, the bung to stop the river coming up is still in place, and it's not the subject of this planning application. It's quite an elevated site, and I've never seen the river, not even on the road, let alone lapping up the side of this house. So I have no objection to this whatsoever.
Any other comments?
Councillor Mark Foster, Chair.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm inclined to go with officers' recommendations on this and refuse permission. What concerns me is all that's been said. When we look at 9.1, I agree, without me reading it out, I agree with all that's been said on the recommendations. What does worry me is that it goes, like it says at the end, to grant permission would be contrary to local plan policies, GS1, NE1, NE2, and policies AP2, AP13 of the Ashford Neighbourhood Plan. When we're putting weight on these documents, these planning documents, which was what we're supposed to do, we're refusing or we're granting permission based on this. And if we ignore it in this case, it's, you know, it's taking the weight away for that, away from these documents for future applications. So I think we've got to be very careful. We've got enough there in that recommendation by the planning office at the end to be paying attention to. So for me, I'd like to propose that we do refuse permission based on the officer's recommendations. So I'd like to propose that.
I would second that, Chair.
Thank you. So is that going to be carried as a motion?
The motion is, Chair, then to approve officer recommendations.
Thank you. No more comments. We'll move to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. If members could clearly indicate for, against, or abstain for the motion put. Councillor Armitage.
Against.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Foster.
For.
Councillor Hall.
For.
Councillor Hartshorn.
For.
Councillor Huckabee.
Abstain.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Liggett.
For.
Councillor Powell.
For.
Councillor Reader.
For.
Councillor Rouse.
For.
Councillor Ruff.
For.
And Councillor Windley.
For.
So, Chair, that's 11 votes for, 1 against, with 1 abstention. So the motion put is carried.
Thank you. Thank you, members.
Just to be clear, Chair, that meant that planning permission has been refused.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, members. That's the final application for this afternoon. We move on to item 5, which is the appeals lodged and determined. Oh dear.
This report is in relation to the standard report of appeals lodged and determined. It's there for members' information. I've got nothing more to say, but if there are any questions, we'll either field them now or get back to members another time.
Are there any questions? No, thank you very much. I've no matters of urgency at all. So thank you, members. planning
Sorry,
section.
Chair. There is the planning enforcement plan item
Yes,
as item
that
6.
was where I was coming to next. So we've got item 6, planning enforcement plan.
Okay, I'll just very quickly, if that's okay with you, Chair, just to run through the sort of headlines of this enforcement plan. It sets out, it's a public-facing document, really, to set out to members of the public what they can expect should they advise the council of a suspected breach of planning control. There are various sections related to it. One sets out the national planning context in relation to enforcement. As there's reference to the important role that enforcement plays within the council in terms of supporting the role of the planning authority. There's also in there reference to prioritisation of types of cases and how quickly we would look to initiate investigations of those, depending on the severity and the impacts of the breaches that have been reported to us. And then there's also for the public information what issues can and cannot be investigated through planning enforcement. And we've tried to be helpful to be able to inform the public that if it's not planning enforcement who can investigate their particular concern, then who else within the council might be able to do it? You know, whether that's in relation to fly tipping or fly posting or various other things like that. And then there's the range of actions that would, are within the armory of planning enforcement. So those all get an airing in the enforcement plan. It also introduces the framework for monitoring performance and reporting back to involved in planning committee on the workloads that we're having and the sort of cases that we're getting, and the monitoring of how quickly we are managing to achieve the standards that are being expected from the plan. It is the responsibility of planning committee. Planning enforcement is the responsibility of planning committee, and the recommendation is that this is adopted as the council's enforcement plan, and then we can, if there are any amendments to it, then any minor amendments to it or things that we think actually need to be covered by it, then we can introduce that. But we're looking to have a routine amendment and revision process every 4 years. So really, shortly after or within the first year of each new administration after each election. So this is really introducing of the plan. It is expected that each authority has an enforcement plan, and this is what we'd like to recommend to you as being our sort of terms of engagement when it comes to planning enforcement.
Thank you, Richard. I will add to that I have actually passed on some small recommendations for changes for this paper, which Richard has actually put forward in a separate document. So it has been upgraded from this at this point.
Yes, indeed. And I could just add that we are working with the comms team to turn the fairly black and white text that you have got on your papers there into something which is more easily consumed by the public in terms of presentation, how the information is delivered.
Thank you. Are there any passing comments at this stage?
Councillor Armitage wishes to speak.
Councillor Armitage?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, there's obviously a great deal of work gone into this proposal. There's only one problem with it. We don't have any enforcement officers at the moment. And can you give some indication as when this problem will be rectified?
Yes, indeed. You're quite right in that, in as much as we've had one enforcement officer for about a year who has recently left the authority. That's the cabinet of earlier on this month. It was agreed that we would be going forward to recruit a second enforcement officer. So we are shortly going to go out to advert for 2 full-time permanent enforcement officers.
Councillor Foster, Chair.
Councillor Foster?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the officers for the work they've done on this, and also move that we accept the recommendations 6162, 63 without me reading them out. So I'd like to move that we follow those recommendations.
Thank you.
Second it, yeah.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions?
No questions from members, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. Do people wish to vote on this at this stage or accept it in principle?
Basically, members are being asked to approve the officer recommendations.
Yes.
Chair, may I suggest that a show of hands on a vote would be appropriate?
That's fine. If everyone can see. Although I'm just looking at mainly a blank screen, so I have no idea.
My apologies, Chair. We're trying to get that resolved for you, although it's a little late now. All members of the committee are indicating a vote for.
Sorry, I'm not seeing Councillor Huckabee. Are you voting for?
Councillor Huckabee is nodding. I'll ask her to unmute.
Indicating yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. That would be carried.
Thank you. As I said earlier, there is no urgent business. Thank you all for your forbearance. It's been a long day. You can all go home and put your feet up. Well, we can. You're there. Good afternoon. Thank you. See you again soon.
Bye.
Chair.
Bye.